I know when you're ready to roll.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, let's go ahead and start.
Okay, the stream is live, Scott.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay. Go ahead and call the MAG Building Codes meeting to order. And with that, we need to have a roll call. Scott?
Mike
you want to do it or
Baxley.
you want me to do it?
I'll do it. Mike Baxley is here.
Here.
Dale Crandall.
Here.
Dave Zellner.
Dave Zellner's here, AJ.
Brett Harris.
Brett Harris is here.
Mike Izzo. Or anybody from Buckeye. Mike Tibbett, or anyone from Carefree. Lee Ray Hanley, or anyone from Chandler. Brigham Bennett, or anyone else from El Mirage. Michael Ashford, or anyone else from Florence. Do we have anybody from Fountain Hills? All right. Larry Taylor?
Present.
Georgie Pavlovic?
Present here.
Randy Westacott?
Here.
Mary Dixon? Or anyone from Litchfield Park? Bill Lahr? Anyone from Maricopa?
Maricopa County, Tom Ewers.
Oh, you're next. Tom Ewers is here.
Here.
John Sheffer.
Present.
Bob Lee. Or anyone from Paradise Valley. Dennis Chase.
Yes, here.
Stephen Dudley. Or anyone from Phoenix.
I am here.
Michael Williams.
Here.
Michael Clack. Or anyone else from Scottsdale. Jeff Rallo.
Present.
Chris Thompson. Or anyone from Tempe. Kevin Bruce.
I'm here.
Gregory Arrington. Or anyone from Youngtown. Jackson Mole.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you.
Hello. Sharon Bonesteel. Michael McMillan. Anyone, any other members or proxies that I didn't name? Okay. Mr. Chair, we do in fact have a quorum.
Scott. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 2 is a call to the audience. An opportunity will be provided to members of the public to provide input through written comment to the Building Codes Committee on items that are not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of MAG, or on items on the agenda for discussion but not for action. Members of the public are asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website at azmag.gov/comment and indicate for which meeting and comment is intended. Do we have any comments, Scott?
I do not.
Moving on will be agenda item number 3, approval of the October 21, 2020 minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes?
I have, Mr. Chair, and I make a motion to approve.
I'll
We have a
second.
motion to approve. Do we have a second? Like Tom Ewers is raising his hand as a second.
Okay.
We have-
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, this will be a roll call vote for approval of the October 21, 2020 minutes. Scott?
Dave Zellner,
Yes, approve.
Brett Harris,
Approve.
Larry Taylor, Georgie Pavlovic,
Approved.
Randy Westacott,
Approve?
Tom Ewers,
Approved.
John Sheffer,
Approved.
Stephen Dudley,
Approved.
Michael Williams,
Approved.
Jeff Rallo,
Approved.
Kevin Bruce,
Approved.
Dale Crandall,
Approved.
and Mike Baxley.
And yes, by unanimous vote, the minutes are approved.
Yep.
Moving on to agenda item number 4, comments from the committee. An opportunity will be provided for the Building Codes Committee members to present a brief summary of current events. The Building Codes Committee is not allowed to propose, discuss, deliberate, or take action on the meeting for any matter in the summary unless a specific matter is properly noticed. Does anybody have any items for consideration? Seeing none, we will move on. I guess we missed the days of Bob Lee being here. He always had 4 or 5 to throw at us.
Mhm.
Next item up for the agenda is going to be item number 5. It's a presentation on closed panel construction, or actually an update on closed panel construction from, as it was related to Bill 2756. And we have, do I see Ryan Harris? I don't see Ryan Harris's name here.
Don't think he's joined yet, so we may need to come back to this item.
Why don't we move to table that and we'll come back to it if he shows up. We'll go on to agenda item number 6. I do know Mr. Glass was here. And we're going to have a presentation on low global warming potential refrigerants. Robert Glass is with Goodman Manufacturing Company and will give us a presentation on the safe transition to low global warming potential GWP refrigerants. And Mr. Glass, the floor is yours.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Let me just share and get things up here.
While you're doing that, Mr. Glass, this is Randy Westcott with City of Goodyear. What is the protocol, Mr. Chair or Scott, for if we have questions during the presentation?
Probably, probably the best. Maybe if it's during the presentation, could you put it in the chat, and we can gather those, or we can I can try to interrupt him if it's possible, or if not, we can wait till after he's gone through the presentation.
And if there's not enough time, we can always I can address comments by email or telephone afterwards if that would be of benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Glass.
Before the presentation
Absolutely.
starts, can we get some clarification? Who is call-in user 1? Somebody on the phone.
Is it Dave Zellner from Apache Junction?
Okay.
I don't
Good.
know. I can't
No.
see any.
No,
there's somebody else on the phone.
Well, this is Tom Ewers. I'm on the phone.
there you go.
Okay, that's it.
It's
Got
Tom.
it. Yep, got it. Thank you.
Multimedia.
Yes. Go ahead, Robert.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, so thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation this afternoon. Obviously the challenges of Arizona not having a statewide building code makes it more difficult to address changes that are necessary to make allowances for new air conditioning and heating refrigeration products that are going to be coming to the marketplace because of the low global warming potential requirements that are coming forward. So this presentation just kind of addresses what those changes and the new refrigerants are, as well as building code changes that are necessary to be able to allow for the usage of them once they are introduced into the marketplace. So the GWP stands for the global warming potential, and ODP is the ozone depletion potential. And these are both internationally recognized terms that are used to evaluate chemicals that discharge into the atmosphere. The global warming potential is a scale that compares all chemicals to carbon dioxide. And then low GWP or lower GWP designation is used to identify refrigerants that have a lower GWP than the prior refrigerants. The table there is just a very brief table. There's many, many more refrigerants, but R410A is the most common refrigerant used for comfort conditioning with a global warming potential of around 2,000. R32, which is one of the lower global warming potential refrigerants that will be introduced into the marketplace, has about 675, about a third of what the GWP than the R410A. And then the other one that's noted there is the R1234YF. That's the next generation refrigerant that's been widely used in the automotive industry, and therefore is their low WP refrigerant of choice for the auto industry. With SNAP, before any new low GWP refrigerant can be used in the United States, it first has to go through the process and be approved by the US EPA SNAP program. SNAP stands for Significant New Alternative Policy. Producers of refrigerants must submit an application to EPA in accordance with the requirements in order to be able to get that refrigerant approved by EPA. And one of the general requirements that EPA looks for is that that refrigerant is being addressed by some national standard, typically Ashrae 15 or the ULCSA 60335-2-40. SNAP Rule 23 has been pre-published addressing refrigerants that are noted there, R32, and then 4 or 5 other refrigerants for use in new residential and light commercial comfort air conditioning and heat pumps. The SNAP rule also notes conditions or restrictions for the materials covered by the SNAP rule. And the final SNAP rule is expected to be published by EPA sometime this spring. Other SNAP rules are being considered by the EPA for chillers and foaming agents that are using A2L refrigerants. So it's an ongoing process based on what the refrigerants are as well as what the applications are.
Hey, Robert, we have a couple questions so far, if I can ask them.
Sure.
How soon do you think our R410A is going to be replaced by R32?
The AIM Act, which was just finalized, I think it was December of 2020, is challenging EPA within the next 270 days to be able to develop a plan for the reducing and the phasing down of the R410A refrigerant. California has recently passed regulations where R410A is going to be outlawed in new materials effective January 1st, 2025 for most comfort conditioning equipment, January 1st, 2026 for VRF equipment, and I think it's January 2023 for PTAX and PTHP products. So it's in the quite near future that this is going to be happening. Obviously in I guess from an introduction of product from manufacturing, I would expect to start seeing products from manufacturers to be available where codes are permitting it, probably sometime in 2022 to 2023 time period.
And the other question so far is, what is the cost difference?
Just like anything, once there is more usage, the costs are going to be coming down. The cost of the equipment is going to be very comparable to what it is. The cost of the refrigerant is higher right now because it's not in wide use, but that is going to be changing as more low GWP refrigerants are being used by manufacturers. And then the cost of the R410A is probably going to start increasing because it's not going to be produced and it's only going to be available from a reclaimed standpoint. So those costs will start rising over time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good, thank you. This little chart here is just a brief overview of just how the standards and the building codes interact. Obviously, you've got safety standards, Ashrae, UL, CSA standards that are developed, and then those are referenced and used by the building codes, the model building codes, in order to create those model building codes. Also, you can see where it goes down to the EPA SNAP rule that refrigerants have to be first referenced or identified and covered by national standards. And then with the model codes and the EPA SNAP going to the building codes, whether they're state, local, or municipal adopted, and then that drives and goes to the market uses. So you see that the building codes are critical in this process, that unless building codes are updated to make allowances for the installation of products with A2L refrigerants, they can't get to the marketplace. So that's why this is a critical part in this process. Ashrae 15 is the main standard used for refrigeration. Ashrae 15.2 that is noted there is still under development, but is expected to be released sometime in 2021 for residential applications. The IMC relies on Ashrae 15 for establishing the minimum refrigerant requirements. The IMC draft code is based on Ashrae 15, and actually many of the requirements in the IMC are extracted directly from Ashrae 15, where the text reads identical between the two documents. In the 2021 IMC, this section 1101.1.1 basically is indicating that refrigeration other than ammonia shall comply with this chapter and Ashrae 15. And that basically if there are requirements that are not found in the mechanical code for refrigeration systems, then Ashrae 15 will regulate it. And hence the need to make sure that Ashrae 15 is updated to the most current standard. And I have a few more slides later on in regards to that. And then Ashrae 15 has addendums to the 2019, which is the current edition, and it continues to be updated as more information becomes available. This is the advantage of referencing the current edition of the Ashrae 15 in the code to provide coverage if the codes are not maintained or are not up to date. Concerning the classification of refrigerants, refrigerant classifications are classified in accordance with the Ashrae 34 standard as listed in the table 1103.1. Ashrae 34 classifies many new low GWP refrigerants as group A2L that were not covered in earlier editions of the Ashrae 34. Again, it's important to reference the latest edition of the Ashrae 34 in the code if the codes, again, are not maintained up to date. And then just a little bit of information about the updates of the Ashrae 15 and Ashrae 34 standards. This is the just a table that identifies the designations of the various refrigerants in Ashrae 34. So Ashrae 34 categorizes refrigerant toxicity as A or B and low or high. It once classified them, the flammability as 1, 2, or 3, non-flammable, lower flammability, and higher flammability. More recently, category 2L has been added, and this is what the categories now look like. 2Ls are mildly flammable refrigerants that have a high lower flammability limit. That is, that they must be present in sufficiently large quantities to ignite, combined with a low flame propagation speed. What is an A2L refrigerant like? Well, tests have shown that they are hard to ignite, and once ignited, they're even harder to keep a sustainable flame. Many of tomorrow's comfort conditioning refrigerants are A2Ls or A3s. A3s are already covered in the safety standards, and some of the requirements include no more than 150 grams per refrigerant loop, and no nearby sources of ignition, and no use near points of egress. So those are the requirements of the A3s that are covered in the Ashrae 34 standard. With the Ashrae 15 standard, this is the premier standard that regulates refrigeration systems. The first edition was back in 1930, so we're 90 years plus that Ashrae 15 has been in existence, providing information about regulating refrigeration systems. And this standard is used in the ICC Mechanical Code and the ICC International Fire Code. The next several slides here are basically just showing what are the differences between the Ashrae 15 2013 or 2016 editions and the 2019 editions. These are provided for reference, and if anybody wants to go back and look at them in more details, they can either look at the slides, or at the end I've got show a link of where anybody can look at the read-only versions of the current Ashrae standards. So for those jurisdictions on the 2015 ICC codes, the 2013 editions of Ashrae 15 and Ashrae 34 are specified. For those jurisdictions on the 2018 codes, the 2016 editions of Ashrae 15 and Ashrae 34 are specified. So what's shown here is just changes from Ashrae 15 2013 to 2016. And these are changes from Ashrae 15 2016 to 2019. These are changes from Ashrae 34 2013 to 2016, or at least a first page, because here's a second page of the changes. And then these are changes from the Ashrae 34 2016 to the 2019, and the second page associated with that. And this is the link that I just talked about that's just at the bottom that can take you to where anybody can look at read-only versions of all the current Ashrae standards. The ULCSA 60335-2-40 standard regulates flammable refrigerants, including A2Ls. And the third edition was published in November of 2019. This standard is now referenced in the 2021 ICC Mechanical Code, and it continues to be referenced in the 2021 ICC Residential Code. The 2019 edition of the standard is used by manufacturers for designing, constructing, and certifying A2L equipment. The IMC requires appliances regulated by the code to be listed and labeled by an approved agency in section 301.7 of the IMC. Label information requirements include the manufacturer's name or trademark, the seal or mark of the testing agency, and two are shown at the bottom here, model and serial number, as well as input rating, electrical rating, efficiency, clearances to combustibles if applicable, and others as noted in the ULCSA 60335-2-40 2019 edition. As far as installation requirements addressed under section 304 of the IMC, product is supposed to be installed in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. When the code is less restrictive, manufacturer's instructions apply. And then from a room location, if a product is allowed to be installed in closets or alcoves, it must be so listed for such an application, as well as if product is to be installed outdoors, it must be listed for that application. Concerning if there's conflicts between the code and the reference standard, Section 102.81 of the IMC states that the code overrides the standard where there is a conflict. For the low GWP refrigerants, the standard references the IMC for the regulating installations. This provides coordination between the standard and the code. Concerning special A2L installation requirements, there are several, but the basic ones are that don't smoke around it, don't operate a torch near the refrigerant, perform a pressure test, vacuum test, and leakage test on the system before leaving. This way, A2L refrigerant systems should be triple checked for any leaks prior to an installer or service person leaving the job site. And the same tools and equipment are used for installation of A2Ls. The exception to that is that recovery machines need to be certified for the A2L refrigerants. Additionally, all installations must follow the manufacturer's installation instructions. To pay close attention to the charge size and location of piping, and to perform an analysis of the allowable charge for the system. The link at the bottom provides access to new A2L training materials that have been created by the Air Conditioning Contractors of America. Also reference to the ULCSA 60335-2-40 2019 standard are provided for more information than can be provided in this brief presentation. As a safety precaution, for the tank fitting connections for flammable refrigerants are unique. They are left-handed threads versus non-flammables that would have a normal right-handed threads. And the unique fitting is intended to prevent the inadvertent connection of a flammable refrigerant tank. The link that I've provided here is to the Ashrae Safe Refrigerant Task Force that provides many resources on A2L refrigerants and may answer many questions that one may have concerning these new refrigerants. Ashrae sponsored fire testing at UL that was developed through cooperation of the fire service. The fire testing proved that A2L refrigerants are equivalent to A1 refrigerants regarding fire hazard. The recorded webinar from January 13th is available for watching at the link provided. This is webinar number 6 at the bottom of the web page in the series of webinars addressing determining application limits and safety requirements for low GWP refrigerants. The Fire Services Research Institute, FSRI, is preparing training materials for first responders, which will be available in 2021 based on the refrigerant fire testing that was completed at UL. Then that website also has a lot of other resources, fact sheets, presentations, webinars, and relevant articles. So it's a great resource for questions that arise concerning A2L refrigerants and at the application of them. With other resources of all HVAC manufacturers who have specified a replacement refrigerant for low GWP, the R32 is the widest selected refrigerant. And the website that I've provided here has been created to help address questions that anyone may have concerning R32. So this is 32 reasons why R32 is the best choice for the next generation refrigerant. So that link is available that anybody can look at in their spare time to find out more about R32 and the advantages of that. Then concerning some of the experience with the low GWP refrigerants, this is experience of both flammable and mildly flammable refrigerants everywhere or elsewhere. Some manufacturers have designed their products to safely use flammable refrigerants. They've reduced their refrigerant charge and reduced the potentials for leak. One manufacturer reports on 6,000 commercial propane ice machines that are operating with no problems. Propane refrigerant room air conditioners are gaining acceptance in India with more than 500,000 in use. The use of A2L are common, very common elsewhere. There's over 100 million R32 mini split systems that are operating safely around the world. And there's more than 600 million refrigerators that are operating with a sterling track record. Over 10 million more are being built each year. And then concerning automobile air conditioners that I had mentioned earlier, there's information that indicates there's over 68 million of those that are operating with A2L refrigerants safely in the system. So moving on to the 2021 code references, the 2021 IRC references Ashrae 34, 2019. It references the CSA UL CSA 60335-2-40, the UL 1995, 2015, and then the UL version of the 60335-2-40. And the 2021 IMC references the 2019 edition of Ashrae 15, the 2019 edition of Ashrae 34, the UL 1995-2015, and then the UL CSA 60335-2-40, but the 2017 edition. So the ICC even has conflicts or correlating issues in that they've specified the 2012 edition and one, the 2017 edition of the other. The 2024 codes are currently beginning the process of update, and the updates to the 2019 60335-2-40 are being addressed through that process. And that if, as anybody needs, that's just a link where you can go to the 2021 IRC and IMC for read-only copies to look at the coverage that's there. The proposals that I would like to make to this group in order to update the codes to be able to make allowances for these low GWP refrigerants are as follows. It would be to add the UL CSA 60335-2-40 as equivalent to the UL 1995 in sections 1402.1 and 2006.1. And this is based on the 2018 Phoenix residential code. If other codes are using earlier versions, there may be some additional updates that would be necessary. So also to update the Ashrae 34 to the 2019 edition in Chapter 44, to update the title of UL CSA 60335-2-40, update to the 2019 edition, and update the sections that are referenced in Chapter 34 under both UL and CSA, and to delete ANSI from Chapter 44. ANSI is no longer associated with the UL CSA 60335-2-40 standard after the second edition, 2017. So they're no longer associated with the 2019 edition. And then concerning the mechanical code, it would be to add the UL CSA 60335-2-40 as equivalent to 1995 in the sections 9081, 916.1, 918.1, 918.2. To update the Ashrae 15 to the 2019 edition in Chapter 15. Update Ashrae 34 to the 2019 edition in Chapter 15. And to add the UL CSA 60335-2-40 2019 edition to Chapter 15 under both CSA and UL. And to add references to usage in the sections 9081, 916.1, 918.1, and 918.2. I've got a note to the 916.1. This may not be available or current in older editions of the mechanical code, but the 2021 mechanical code has a section for pool and spa heaters, and heat pump pool heaters would be directly affected by this. It's also covered under in the IRC, but this is they've added it in the 2021 IMC as well. So this would maybe another section that would need to be updated or added to. And then substantiation for the amendments is that manufacturers are going to be transitioning away from the UL 1995 to the UL CSA 60335-2-40 for new products, since UL 1995 will be withdrawn by UL effective 1/1/2024. This is a document provided by UL on a roadmap to the withdrawal of the UL 1995 in lieu of the UL CSA 60335-2-40. The newest third edition of the 60335-2-40 standard includes many new requirements for electrical and refrigerant safety, including UVC germicidal lamp systems, CO2 systems, photovoltaic systems, new marking requirements, water ingress rating system, as well as allowances for low GWP group A2L refrigerants. The residential code already includes equivalent references to the ULCSA 60335-2-40 for UL 1995, and the mechanical code should also. The 2021 IMC already references the 2019 edition of Ashrae 15 and Ashrae 34. The 2021 IRC references the Ashrae 34 2019 edition. Again, UNSAE should be deleted from the references since it's no longer associated with the 2019 edition of the -2-40 standard. Florida and Washington have previously adopted these amendments, and they are currently in effect in those states. So it's something that these changes are being addressed and adopted around the United States. And these are just two of the ones that have already made the move, made the changes, and their new codes are currently in effect. And then this is just noting that if anybody needs any help to go ahead and provide individualized underline or strikeout proposals for the IRC and IMC based on the information contained in this presentation, and based on your current editions of the codes, I will be glad to go ahead and provide that information to you to assist in making these the proposals for updates. And that's the end of the presentation, and open the floor for any questions. And then besides that, this is my contact information that I can leave on the screen, so that if anybody has additional questions and things later on, you can feel free to let me know. So open the floor for any other questions, and that concludes my presentation.
All right.
Thank
you,
you,
Mr.
Robert.
Glass. Do we have any questions from anybody for Mr. Glass? I see one more in the chat here, which is Mr. Glass's information. Does anybody have any questions?
I just want to thank Robert for putting together this presentation. I know he reached out to me, and I felt it was worthy. And I hope the rest of the group appreciates it. And I certainly appreciate Robert's efforts to offer assistance in any amendments that might need to be done to take care of this. So thank you, Robert. I really appreciate your time and your experience, and appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Robert, has you or your organization made any attempts to get some of this stuff into the codes at this point, or have you really just focused on contacting individual states and jurisdictions?
No, there's been significant efforts that have been addressing this both through the ICC codes as well as through IAPMO for the UMC code, which I know doesn't affect Arizona. But the problem with that is that many states are multiple series of codes behind, and as a result, just getting addressed at the model code level is one thing, but when it could take years until those make it down to the individual states to go ahead and adoption, that's why we're also looking at going to the states and looking to provide proposals and assistance to try to go ahead and get the states to amend their current codes to make allowances for these products to be able to be installed. And then eventually it may catch up to the model codes that then would have the necessary changes to them to allow for these products.
Sure. And have you experienced pushback from the model codes on the 20-40 standard as opposed to the other one?
No, as I noted, the -2-40 standard has been added to the 2021 IMC. It was previously in the IRC. So that has been updated that way. The updating to the current edition of the standard, that was not updated in the IMC because the 2019 edition of the -2-40 standard was not released until November, and the work on the updating the codes for the 2021 was already completed at the IMC level, and so they wouldn't adopt a standard that had not been released yet. So this is being addressed in the 2024 edition. All proposals have already been submitted to ICC, and then the hearings to address all of the proposals that have been submitted start in April for the ICC codes and start in May for the IAPMO UMC.
Okay. Last question. I know I'm monopolizing here. So what would be your biggest selling point to update to the most recent standard as opposed to just using the one that's in the 2021?
Well, okay, and there you're talking about the -2-40 standard?
Yes.
The latest version of the standard is what includes, and I had a slide that showed all of the new, I guess, products and things that are addressed under the -2-40 2019 edition that are not addressed under an earlier edition of the -2-40 standard. So it's the requirements that are addressed under the 2019 edition that also then references the 2019 editions of the Ashrae 34 and the Ashrae 15. That it's really all of those need to be referenced to be properly allowing for these new refrigerants to be installed and be in compliance with the building codes.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? I'm hearing none. Well, thank you, Mr. Glass, and for bringing that information to us. And I'm sure everybody's going to take it back to their jurisdictions, and you may hear from several people about the information you presented.
Absolutely, and as I noted, that anything that I can do, that if somebody's interested in getting proposals for their particular jurisdiction, all I need to know is what is the edition of the code that you're currently on, and then I can provide individualized underlined strikeout proposals to address in your particular jurisdiction.
Thank you.
You know, I think even if you're even if you're not planning to completely eliminate the use of the prior editions, it would be wise to allow the use of the current edition so that those new products can be utilized without having to follow a special procedure or appeal to the building official. So that's a consideration also.
Another thing to think about too is that the addition of the -2-40 standard into the codes here does not preclude the ability for product currently listed to the 1995 to continue to be sold and installed in accordance and in allowance with the codes. It's purely opening the door for these new products to be able to be certified and to be able to be installed in the jurisdictions to avoid conflicts with building codes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I wanted to mention that I put Robert's email and phone number in the chat. So if anybody didn't get to write that down from the presentation, you can get that from the chat here. And I'm also planning on putting his presentation on our website so you can get all the gory details if you need it.
And both of those links that he had in there are in the chat too.
Yes.
Has, Scott, has anybody from the Arizona Department of Housing shown up while we were doing that presentation?
Not that I can see.
Okay. That being said, move on. And I don't see Dustin here.
He is here, I believe.
Did I miss him?
I think he's just labeled as Dus.
I'm
There
here.
Okay. So agenda item number 7, quarterly trust manufacturers list. MAG publishes a list of approved trust manufacturers on its website every quarter. The committee will discuss the status of this list, if it is still needed, and any updated procedures for keeping it updated, including finding a new volunteer to maintain and update the list. And Dustin, I got a feeling that you want to talk about this because you are the current volunteer.
That's correct. And I would like to pass that on to somebody else if the committee feels like they still need to do this. And I can give you the information that I use in generating the list, which it's actually relatively simple. I kind of had to figure it out when I don't know Cheryl's last name now, but I think it was Cheryl Mullins at the time when she retired the first time before she came back to work at Peoria. She, this got passed on to me, but it was after she had left. And so I kind of had to piece everything together and figure out where all the stuff came from. And it's pretty simple. There's 2 locations I find who has their quarterly inspections being done. And one of them comes from Timber Products. It's Timber Products Inspections. And the other one is from, it's a Quality Insurance Inspections. And I go to their website for Structural Building Components Research Institute. I check those and verify who's on the list and not, and just update it from there and email it to Scott for him to update the website. And so it's relatively simple, but it's something I'm not sure if the board still wants to, or the committee still wants to continue with it. If, that's sufficient, research into determining who's a qualified trust manufacturer, but that's how it's been for, I'm not sure how long I've been doing this, but it's more than 5 years.
It's been a while.
Yes, it is.
So let me ask this of the group here that's representing the jurisdictions. Is there anybody not using this list in their reviews?
City of Apache Junction doesn't use the list. We require the trust plans.
Okay, so based on that, City of Apache Junction seems to be the only ones not using it. Does that, I take that to mean that we still see this as a valuable asset going forward. Is that correct? I see a nods of heads. That's kind of good. So we need to have, obviously, Dustin has been doing this for quite a while, and would like to pass the torch. And so what we would need is volunteers to carry this torch and keep this, the approved trust list up to date and on file with Scott.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just had a thought while Dustin was describing his process. If you're taking information from these two websites, would it be as effective if we just put the links to those websites on our building codes page? And that way, anybody who needs them can click on those links and then get the current information rather than wait for it to be updated? Or is there something I'm missing in this process?
If I could chime in, one of them is a website. The other one is a letter that's just emailed to me. So it comes from Truss Products, or Timber Products, I should say. They email me the list each quarter. It's usually the beginning of the quarter. For that quarter is when they send it out. But it's an email. It's just a PDF attachment to it. So it's not a web link on that one.
Okay. Thanks.
And so it's simply just, Dustin, it's just simply somebody compiling that information that is brought to you and putting together as a list, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I just check the, most recent list and check make sure they're still on it. If they're not, they come off. If there's additional ones, they go on. Pretty simple process.
So one of the things we'd want to do is, because way back when Cheryl had it, and before Dustin, we had the building inspector plans examiners forum. I remember those days, and we always had a group of people eager to volunteer at that point in time. However, now times are a little bit harder. So if you guys would go back and see if you have anybody in your jurisdiction that would be willing to take this on for a period of time. I would not personally see this as 5+ years, but we can revisit this from time to time and spread the wealth. With that, I would suggest that, Scott, you can take recommendations from everybody or volunteers.
Yes. I guess if you have somebody in your shop who will do this, email.
Let's put people on the spot now. Does anybody have a person in their jurisdiction that be willing to do this now? Or do you need to go back and think about it and volunteer somebody or voluntold?
I was going to say it's more like voluntold, isn't it? But I am going to ask for volunteers from my organization and see if there's somebody that would like to take it on. And then I can communicate with Scott on that. But, if Scott were to get 4 or 5 volunteers, then we could make a selection on who, and then potentially talk about rotating it. I don't know.
Yeah, if that happens, we'll figure out a good way to do it.
What a terrible situation to be in, right?
I don't anticipating having that problem.
Right.
What you might consider is looking in your office at the person who does most of the reviews on the trust calcs. Because them having all the contact information for all of the different companies that do their trusses and who their engineers are and all that sort of thing is probably a valuable piece of information for them doing their job. Just a thought.
It's a good thought, Sharon.
You're on the beach, Sharon. That's just not fair.
So yeah, if you want to talk to your staff, email me, copy Dustin, and so he can know that he is being relieved. He'll be relieved to be relieved.
When I first heard that, I thought for sure Dustin must be ready to retire. That's why he's passing the torch, because he's been doing it for so long.
Yeah, he gets extra points with ASRS for doing the trust list.
That would be nice.
So yeah, just email me and Dustin, and we'll figure it out from there.
Okay.
All right, Dustin, we will do our best to get you off the hook there, bud.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. All right, moving on to agenda item number 8, the legislative update. Seems that our legislature has been busy again this year, and we've asked to have somebody give us an update on pending legislations. Scott, do we have somebody?
We have Renee Guillen from the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. He's waving to us. And we specifically had asked for someone who can talk about, it's not on the list, but Renee knows the number.
I've got 3 that I knew. I was thinking about 2716, 2861, and 2057. Does that ring a bell?
One of those is definitely one that I specifically asked Renee. And while he's talking about that, if you can put it in the chat, all 3 of those, I'll look those up and see what we can figure out.
Sure. Was it maybe 1057?
May have been. That was hours ago when I wrote that down.
I'll have to look up
I'll
have to look up 2057.
Surveys to get permits.
Oh yeah, that I can talk about that one in a little bit. I think that only applies to counties, if I remember right.
Okay.
So Tom will care. But no, Renee was going to talk about the which one was that? The required
2716 was on the list. I have a list of 5 I'd like to touch base on if that's
great.
all right.
Fire away, man.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. And for those who don't know me, my name is Renee Guillen. I'm a Deputy Director over at the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. Thank you for having me. Maybe I'll just kind of give a little bit of an overview of session. So, Tom Savage in our office is more of the expert on these items, but this is the last week to hear bills in committee in the Chamber of Origin. So Senate bills in the Senate and House bills in the House. So it is a very busy week with committee engagements. And so I think this week our staff are signing in and or testifying on almost 40 bills. So today, and then thankfully tomorrow, hopefully by tomorrow evening, they'll be done, get a little bit of a break, and then it all starts anew following after. And I will say the caveat or the exception to that rule, because there's always an exception, is that appropriations always gets an extra week to meet. And of course, the Speaker and President could always extend deadlines. We haven't heard any word of them extending deadlines. But again, always a chance. And of course, with budget bills, they always allow those to go through late as well. It is a record year for bills. I don't know that it's the highest record, but I think the Senate set a record and the House approached a record for total of bills that have been introduced this session. And I think those are attributable, frankly, to a number of factors. I think one, last year was a truncated session with very few bills passed, so you have a lot of repeat bills. 2, a lot of bills that are being run this year are mirror bills, so the same exact language is being introduced in the House and the Senate, and I hope to fast track it because, of course, then it just goes straight to the governor's office. So because people were afraid that we'd have a truncated session due to COVID-19. Number 3, we have seen a record number of bills relating to elections. So we have seen, given what happened in November, and I guess, up through January, arguably, that has led to a number of bills being introduced all across the board from both sides of the aisle on elections. And then the last is, I think, what I would call changing political dynamics. The House and Senate are now both separated only by 1 vote margin in terms of the majority caucus and the minority caucus. So I think you are seeing the minority parties, Democrat in both chambers, introduce more bills, and we're actually seeing some be heard and moved. And then to some extent, I think you're also seeing Republicans introducing more bills because I don't know that they would ever say this, but I think some of them fear that this is their last term in the majority. After seeing that Arizona go blue for Biden at the presidential level, and then now both of our senators being Democrats and having a Democrat majority in Congress representing Arizona, I think that there may be some looking to push through some of their bills in the next 2 years out of fear that their time in the sun is coming to an end, I guess, for lack of a better term. So that's what's leading to these weeks being very busy, these agendas being very busy. And what's sort of interesting, which is maybe a sign of the times in general, with the numbers being so close, right? If you're any one Republican in the House or Senate, you hold a lot of power, because if you're gone or if you're voting no, the Republicans cannot pass anything. And so what's interesting is one could think that would maybe lead to more bipartisanship and collaboration because the numbers are so close. I would argue it's the opposite, and things are pretty partisan and pretty divided. So we'll see how that translates into the budget. But that's sort of your overview for the legislature. And I guess just one final note is that what's nice, I love this week because essentially after this week, early next week, we can look and you basically know, I would argue 95% of the universe of bills, right? Because we have strike everything amendments in Arizona that could change that. But generally speaking, the world that's out there. So I had 5 bills I just wanted to note. Senate Bill 1057 was one that we had tracked, and this was sort of tangential, I thought, for this group. It had to deal with prompt pay statutes, dealing with basically payments going from the public entity to the general to the sub. That bill was not scheduled for a hearing. From a municipal perspective, we felt we were pretty much there, if not completely there, in terms of us being okay with the bill, but the proponents actually tabled it for this year. So if you ever get involved in that aspect of business, then that would be one to look at, because I would certainly expect that to come back in the future. Another one is Senate Bill 1062. This is engineering definitions, and this just passed this week, I believe, passed the Senate on a vote from 24-5. So that will be heading over to the House. I believe I'll have to double check, but I believe we're officially neutral on that bill, the league. So it does a number of things. I believe the main purpose of the bill was to make it easier. And this is something we've seen a little bit of in terms of broad issues, and to some extent from both parties, is the, I want to call it challenge, I guess I would say, of the apprentice mentor relationship in a number of industries is not as strong as it once was. So I think this was part of that, in that it was aiming, or is aiming, to make it easier for those who aren't quote unquote professional engineers to do engineering work on contracts. Our concern was we didn't want these. So, and these are all statutory terms, so I'm not trying to insult anyone by calling them a professional engineer versus an engineer, but these are statutory terms. Our concern was that we wanted to make sure that it was a professional engineer who'd still be the one for applying the stamp, that just someone who didn't meet the highest tier of education and qualification couldn't be out there certifying plans or projects. And so the bill was amended. And so that is moving through the House. So I don't know that, it's one to look at, I guess, if you're curious about that aspect. I think that's more on the private sector, and like I said, on workforce development, but that's one to check out. Senate Bill 1258.
Renee, I'm sorry. Can we take these one at a time? And the first one,
sure,
if it's tabled, I guess probably not as big a deal, but
right.
Are there comments on this one, the definition of engineering? Okay, I just wanted to make sure nobody had questions.
Yeah, no, good point, Scott. The next one is Senate Bill 1258. This is also a Senator Mesnard bill, so out of the East Valley, out of Chandler, and so it's been amended, and actually this is probably one that Jackson, I think, could probably speak to as well. I don't know. I know he had a note in the chat, but essentially under an emergency order declaration from the governor, if it is suspending activity, this would toll your permit authorization. And so this one just came out of Cal amended. It is awaiting Senate third read. I don't think it's been scheduled for a third read yet. The league is neutral. I think with the language, or with the amendment, it largely mirrors the process many of our cities have taken or are currently operating under as a result of COVID-19, and recognizing that it's more difficult for applicants to get in to handle business in a normal way. Or also some industries have been shut down, and that has also caused delays. And, I think it will be no surprise for you guys that, again, at the league, we generally operate under two major tenets: protecting shared revenue and protecting local control. And so this is a shall. This is saying you shall award or you shall toll the permits. But like I said, the league is registered neutral. I think there's still some elements of the amendment that are not our staff, but your staff hopefully are going through and reviewing and providing feedback to Tom Savage. And so I'll pause for questions, and Jackson, if you have any comments.
I do.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, go ahead, Jackson.
Yeah, so this bill did come out of COVID. And first off, I want to just preface all this with just so you know the scope of the bill. It applies not just to cities and towns, but also to counties, and then also with the amendment to the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. But it did come out of COVID. Now, fortunately, during COVID, we were able to work with most of the cities to address kind of the uncertainty, especially at the initial stages, where people didn't know how they were going to be able to proceed and things like that. But it did make us realize that in future emergencies, we may not be so fortunate. And so we needed to figure out, and we wanted to have kind of a statewide policy in place to deal with what do we do if there's an emergency situation that disrupts the just ordinary operations of government to the point where we're not able to do something like what we were able to do with COVID. So we again introduced this bill, and through amendment, as Renee mentioned, we've narrowed the scope from just kind of a blanket all emergencies specifically to emergencies that impact government operations, and then also from all activity to just construction. So as Renee noted, there are a few additional details that we're continuing to have discussions about, most notably about kind of what kind of notice either does the city, town, county provide to the regulated community versus what sort of notice do we provide then back to those jurisdictions indicating a desire to extend the time to pursue whatever activities authorized by the permit. So there's a little bit of work that's left to be done, but we have significantly narrowed the scope, like I said, specifically to address emergencies which may cause an interruption in just the ordinary operation of business of the government. So hope that helps.
Any additional comments or questions on 1258? Okay, moving on. Sorry, I'm changing between tabs here. Next one is House Bill 2716, and I will actually probably ask Jackson to help me on this one as well, because there was a significant amendment that was adopted. Its current status. One second, my mouse is dying. So that is a Griffin bill. Representative Gail Griffin bill that passed out of Commerce yesterday, 6-4. And like I said, there was a significant amendment adopted. And so that is not engrossed yet. So that's not, we don't have a Senate engrossed version of that bill yet. So you kind of have to match up line numbers and changes. So I apologize if I, in my sort of side-by-side am missing anything. I will say broadly, it does two major things or two main things. One, if a municipality requires a building permit for the construction of single-family dwellings, then the city shall issue the building permit within 7 business days after the applicant submits an administratively complete application. And then there's a number of I guess call them parameters, provisos that need to go with that as well. And then there's also a piece, so I'm sure you guys are all familiar, and actually, Larry, I think this might be where I first met you, was when I was early in my days at the league the first time around, which was on Senate Bill, was that 1598, I think? And so you may recall from there that there was an effort that essentially took the federal APA, Administrative Procedures Act, and then it's been applied to this. It's been applied here in Arizona, and then it was applied to counties and municipalities. And so a piece of that is licensing timeframes. So in that licensing timeframes, wherein if you have an ordinance that's requiring a permit, you have to go through the process to establish licensing timeframes to give regulatory certainty to the industry. In that statute, it does add language stating that the municipality cannot prioritize applications for a license under that section over essentially licenses that does not apply to. And then let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything major on the high end. And like I said, there was an amendment adopted that makes some changes. Like I said, business days, the original bill says calendar days. It does talk about the idea that if you don't grant the building permit within the 7 days, that it's deemed to have been granted. Trying to think if there's anything on the major side. It does provide a definition for administratively complete. The league is opposed to this bill. And again, as I said, I mean, it is a shall. I should also point out the amendment also points out that you can prioritize based off of time submission, right? So you can prioritize based off of, first come, first serve. And so with that, I imagine Jackson, you probably have some thoughts and comments as well.
I do. Yeah, you did a pretty good job of giving the background. So if it's okay with everybody, I'll give you a little bit of background and then I'll go into a little bit more specificity in terms of what the amendment does. But as Renee mentioned, kind of going all the way back to 2011, the legislature enacted Senate Bill 1598, which among other things required cities and towns to set timeframes for issuing permits, licenses, and approvals. And if you fail to meet those timeframes, then you were required to refund any fees paid. Shortly after that bill was enacted, many of our cities and towns came to us to talk to us about the potential consequences of this bill. And specifically, our members were told that, one of the consequences would be that if we got up against these deadlines, that the city may simply just deny the permit and require us to resubmit with additional fees, because that was one of the options available under the time frame. So over the next year, we then worked to exempt out residential construction from the framework of 1598. And we also made some additional significant amendments to make the bill more workable for the cities. Those changes were enacted in 2012 with House Bill 2443. Since that time, where we have struggled with turnaround times to get through any aspect of the municipal approval process, frequently we're told by municipalities that they must prioritize commercial permits over residential, because if they do not and don't meet those turnaround times, then they'll be forced to refund fees. And so we got frustrated with the idea that we were kind of being placed at the back of the line, because we worked with the cities and towns to exempt ourselves from the requirements of 1598. So that's the first aspect of the bill, is to try to recreate a level playing field on that. And so that's why the amendment was then added to clarify that you can prioritize on the basis of first in, first out, first come, first serve, that sort of thing. But we do think that the policy of creating timely and predictable timeframes is a good one. And we have in fact struggled in some instances with getting permits recently. But the question becomes, what's the appropriate enforcement tool to ensure that municipalities stick to those times? And so given the problems with using a fee refund as the enforcement tool, this bill set out to try a different approach. Plus, fee refunds don't really work for our members, because we're more interested in just starting construction, because we have a house that we have to deliver to a customer on a predictable time frame. The homeowners have logistical challenges with packing up their stuff, finding a place to live, determining when they're going to move in, where their kids are going to go to school, all of those things. So we'd much rather just begin construction. But we recognize that there are potential issues with kind of an automatic approval or some version of that. So we wanted to start with a modest approach in terms of what we saw as the least risky scenario, which is you've got your building permit, or your building safety plans are already approved. Water's already been approved and provided to the site for fire suppression. So all we're doing is just submitting the building permit application, which in a large degree is going to basically just verify that the model that's going to be built on that lot is approved for construction. You've been through design review, the setbacks are appropriate and all that stuff. And so then what we decided was that what we'll do is we'll just authorize a temporary permit that would allow procedure, or that would allow the builder to proceed with construction, but then would still leave all of the enforcement for all the regulatory provisions with the city because of the ability to hold a certificate of occupancy if there are any life safety issues that are presented through construction. And then with this amendment, we also clarified kind of the at-risk nature of proceeding under a temporary permit by saying that not only can the city require you to correct any life safety issues, but also that you have to be able to demonstrate that you've met all the requirements for issuing the building permit in the first place. So we're hopeful that with those two things in place, that gives the city comfort that we understand the actual at-risk nature of this, and kind of, lets us go forward with kind of this modest approach to try to figure out if this is a better way to deal with the turnaround time issue. So those are kind of the big amendments and the background, but if anybody has any question, I'm happy to try to answer those.
And I saw we had something in the comments, but just real quick, Jackson, I do want to thank you for pointing that out, because I think that does go in the amendment about the piece of essentially catching it on the back end is kind of how I think of it. And so I was actually texting our folks, and so because the amendment does make a number of changes, I don't have an updated policy based on the amendment. So that is something we're still reviewing as well. And so I'm sorry, I heard someone chiming in there.
Well, it was me. It's Mike Baxley. So one of the things that I see in this bill is it is expressly detailed towards tract builders, where you would have a standard set of plans there. 7 days to do a complete review on 15,000 square feet of custom doesn't even occur. I don't know what jurisdiction would be able to perform at that level. So, I would hope to see that we would see some sort of carve out for homes that aren't sitting under a set of standard plan type of permit issuance.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that is something that we contemplated with this. And so in the original, so in the version of the bill that's been introduced, it does talk about that the and I got the phrase right here, that the construction documents have to have been approved. So even under a custom scenario, my interpretation would be that you would have all the time that the city needs or the town needs to actually do the building safety review, and then whatever applicable design review there would be, whether it's a custom home or just a production home. And so then it would only be the actual issuance of the building permit once all those other criteria had been satisfied that would then trigger the provisions of the bill.
And Mr. Chairman, I think there's a couple questions in the chat, or a couple of people that would like to speak in the chat. So Dave and then Michael.
Yeah, this is Dave Zoner. I lost video. My screens keep cutting out. But one of the questions I have, we actually put it in our local ordinance that in regards to the start of a subdivision and the things that need to be resolved before a house, the whole work in a subdivision model and all that stuff can occur. And so this would impact that, and I think steps on some other entities and agencies, community district, facilities districts and stuff like that, that in the case that they haven't done everything they need to meet all the rules for the subdivision, and then all of a sudden they get to automatically get permits, fire districts are affected. So I think that's another place that has to be addressed. If you've gotten your first approvals and it's an issue with an ongoing master plan, review and stuff, which is a planning department thing most of the time to make sure that the house fits the lot, which is going to be incredibly expensive to fix, Jackson, if you mess up, and should still be considered a life safety measure. Those are some things that this doesn't consider.
So as it relates to the setback issue, that was one of the reasons why we did the amendment to say that you have to meet the requirements to get the building permit in the first place, because we understand and we're going into this knowing that if you proceed under a temporary building permit and you do not have those correct, that will have to be remedied.
Okay, thank you.
And
this is Mike Clack in Scottsdale. I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask about this, and I think one of them may have been answered regarding the 7-day turnaround for a plan. Are we talking about a standard plan that has already received a review, and then you're just looking to have that standard plan set on a specific lot?
Yeah, so that would be the most common application of this, but it would apply to a custom or single standalone home, but it doesn't apply to the review of all the construction documents. It only applies to the issuance of the building permit.
Right. So in order to issue the building permit, you have to determine compliance. And so I can't issue a building permit until I know that the building itself is in compliance. And for a lot of these custom homes, particularly in Scottsdale, that's going to take more than 7 days.
Yeah, so the way I would explain it is this, and I hope this helps, but that the provisions of the statute, should it be enacted, would not be triggered until Scottsdale has approved those building permits and has given notice to the applicant that the permit that the plans have been approved. So then what would be triggered is the time frame between when the applicant then says, okay, issue my building permit, and when you then actually issue the building permit, not the process of approving and certifying the plans as being complete and safe.
Okay, here's the other issue that I've got, and I've still got questions on that, especially the way we do things in Scottsdale. Usually when we say it's approved, we're ready to issue the permit that day or the next day or whenever the check comes in. But the other thing that I had an issue with was I read in there that site plans were not considered part of the construction documents. And I have a real issue with that because in Scottsdale, we have a lot of special flood hazard areas. And that is something we pay particularly close attention to. And typically those plans come in the same bundle as the actual house as part of the approved plans, because we have to make sure that it's in compliance with all the FEMA regulations before we can issue a building permit. And when you separate it out like that, I think you're adding, in fact, I know you're adding more of a cumbersome process to where it's going to be making it very difficult for us to review these things in a timely manner by having the plans separated versus having it all the same in your custom home building.
So Michael, let me ask you a follow-up question because that's a good point. So on where you're reviewing for the flood plan areas, is that actually on the site plan or is that a separate application?
No,
is it a separate submittal document?
It's all, typically it's all in the same document. Now where it's separate is when you're having a large subdivision. Then that's a separate review for the entire subdivision. Okay. But for individual lots that aren't necessarily in a subdivision or where they're making specific changes, it's hard to separate that. And in fact, before I got on this call, I was talking with an engineer specifically on that subject and trying to figure out their drainage requirements.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's a good point, and so I will relay that concern for consideration on how we proceed with that. But I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a good point.
Yeah, because I think in I'm sorry, but I think in Scottsdale we have a pretty good process, particularly with the standard plans. We take our time, we review those, but when they come in and for a specific lot, then it's typically, drainage does a quick second review on that to make sure it's okay. and planning does it also for height considerations and things of that nature. And so we've got a good process, I think, already that's pretty timely. And I'd hate to see us get punished, so to speak, for trying to do the right thing and help you all out. And then I don't understand the concept or the term temporary permit. That just kind of sticks in my craw a little bit. I don't know what a temporary permit is. In fact, all permits are temporary until the building is finished.
Yeah. Okay. I understand that concern. Yeah.
Hey, Jackson, just to dovetail onto what Michael was saying there. I mean, it's not just floodplains, but custom homes built on side of the mountains where you're going to have retaining walls invested in there, fire setback distances sometimes from property lines. There's a myriad of things that go on with those additional plans that when you're building a subdivision, those are presented in a different fashion, but on a custom home, it's all in one at one time.
Yeah, those are very good
Thanks for
points.
that. Yeah, thanks for that.
Did I hear you say they have to have an approved water source?
Yes.
So that means an approved subdivision with water, not a fire truck or water truck?
The way that it's described in the bill is the municipality has approved water service for fire suppression in the community in which the dwelling is to be constructed. So if the municipality has approved the water source from whatever source that may be, as long as the city says we're okay with you using that for fire suppression and it specifically calls out fire suppression, then that seems to comply with those two prerequisites for then triggering the bill.
Yeah.
Let me back up a bit. Does this just apply to cities or does it apply to counties as well?
Just cities for right now.
And one thing I'd like to bring up real quick on that that you just stated, in these subdivisions, we won't even issue a building permit until the basic infrastructure is in. And that includes not just the water for firefighting purposes, but also they have a drivable surface for the fire trucks to be able to access the site. And because it doesn't do any good to have water and then the truck can't get there. And so we go into a lot of negotiations sometime as to how much of the site we're going to approve at what stage and all that. So I'd have some real concerns about that. And I know our fire department would too, because they're real proud of their trucks.
And in Glendale, we have identical approach, like Michael mentioned. We don't issue any permits until we very often have a site meeting as well. We meet with everybody and that everybody understands why they cannot get the first permit there. But again, it's for everybody's sake. You don't want to have trouble with fire access during the constructions.
I wonder, I'm sorry.
No problem. Just
I was just to throw out to Jackson, I wonder if you just shorten that to say, it'd have to be worked a little bit, but just take out the water service piece and make it clear that it's about the fire. I don't know if you guys have a fire suppression and access plan, or because right, I mean, I think that's what you were trying to get at, it sounds like.
Well, it shouldn't just be fire. It should be for emergency services. If you've got construction going on and you don't have a viable route to get there and somebody gets impaled on a piece of rebar and you've got to get paramedics there or an ambulance there or something like that, and you don't have a drivable surface, or somebody has a heart attack ways away from the paved roadway, then you've got, it's not necessarily a fire, but it's an emergency service, and somebody could die of a heart attack because we can't get there quick enough. So I think there's more to think about, as far as once we have approved plans, being able to issue a permit within 7 days. I don't think that really should give anybody too much heartburn, because once the plans are approved, by golly, you should issue a permit within 7 days. And like Mike says, collect the funds and move on. But you know, when it comes to subdivisions and all, there's certain things that you want to make sure that you have there for all emergency services, whether it be fire, police, or medical, or medical. So
yeah, this is all good feedback. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
You had your hand up, so to speak, in the comments. Did you get your question asked or answered, or?
Is that?
Jackson, is there opportunity for further amendments at this point?
I'd have to check and see where, I know it came out of committee last night with the amendment we discussed. So there are, from time to time it gets amended on the floor during COW. So I'll just have to take this feedback back and kind of mull through it and kind of see where we stand from there. But again, I really appreciate everybody's feedback. I was excited when I saw this agenda item on there because it provides a convenient way to get kind of everybody's thoughts.
Yep. Yeah, and I would just say that again, I don't know if it would be Spencer or who would be the lead, but if there is changes you're looking at, if you could, I guess you could reach out to me, but Tom Savage is kind of the lead, but I'm also happy to help. And so most likely I would say under standard practice, this will go to the floor next week, right? So most likely it passed out this week, it'll get rules and then caucus and then COW. Now what's nice is that since it hasn't gone through COW yet, you could just do a substitute floor amendment that would have the same bulk of the same language, that we just have been talking about, but with whatever maybe additional tweaks that could be discussed and hammered out. So there's time. Not a lot of time, but there's time. That's sort of what I would say. So should we move on to the last bill?
This one, I wanted to mention if there are changes based on this or based on anything else, if Renee and Jackson, if you can let me know so I can let the committee know where this stands, and then I'll be following this as well. But you guys are closer to this than I am.
Yeah, where I can, I'm happy to do that.
Thanks.
And then the last one is House Bill 2861. This one passed out of committee also yesterday, 6-4. So essentially in the same position as 2716, except this one was not amended. And I guess if I try to summarize it, it's not a very substantive bill, but basically it says that your department has to run at cost recovery. And it's probably the easiest way to say it, right? So it says that any fees charged for issuing a building permit may be used only to fund the department responsible for issuing the building permit. It may not be used as revenue for the general expenses of the municipality. And so, I don't know how many of you guys have to worry about the budget. If you're not worried about the budget, this probably doesn't have much impact on you. I think at this point, we are certainly looking for feedback. I've certainly heard of departments running on cost recovery. I've heard of departments where cities make the choice to subsidize development services and some of these departments as sort of a pro-business move. I so far haven't heard of anyone, subsidizing the other way. So I know the league put out, I'm not sure if it came from Tom Savage or from Nick Ponder. We put out an email to our intergovs asking them, hey, does your whatever department issues building permits, are you operating as an enterprise fund? Are you cost recovery? How are you operating? And I'm not sure, what information we've received on that. Any feedback you could provide, certainly we'd appreciate just to understand, how this would impact your local operations. I guess that's it for me. And Jackson, I don't know if you have any thoughts, comments on that.
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple. First off, yeah, there were some concerns or issues raised at yesterday's committee hearing, which we're evaluating. But ultimately, when it comes to the permit fees, we kind of look at four things. Do the fees reflect the cost of providing the service? Is the service being performed in a timely fashion? Are the fees reasonable in light of the service that's being provided? And are the funds being used to fund the services that our members are paying for, or is it being used to fund other city services or one-time expenses? And so when we were looking at this bill, we were looking at the ability of cities to add capacity where demand is increasing, and the potential that you wouldn't be able to do that because those decisions are subject to the decisions of others, despite the fees going into your specific departments or being paid into your departments. And so this is, at least as it relates to the actual fees themselves, kind of a nominal change, because the current statute says that the city's not prohibited from recovering reasonable costs. Now it says it does not prohibit, or that a city's not prohibited from charging fees that are reasonably proportionate to the direct costs associated with reviewing and issuing a building permit. And so that's kind of the background on where this bill's coming from and what it's attempting to do. But again, I'm happy to get any feedback that any of you all have.
Yeah, my first thought was you're trying to make us a enterprise fund, which is we're not. And so I had some concerns as far as that was concerned.
Well, and I think it would force every department, no matter what its size, to have a designated person responsible for itemizing the cost and, dealing with finance. How much are we paying you, finance, to process all these checks, and how much do I owe the city for the building I'm using? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, agreed. And to that end, that's the term direct cost. Accounting term, that means one thing, and of course there's HR support, legal support, payroll support. I mean, there's so many things intertwined in the operation that to say direct cost, could easily, block those things out, where it would be difficult for us to continue to run without hiring people in the department now to handle what would have been, handled elsewhere. And especially for, in a larger city where you have enough staff that you have a dedicated HR person, you've got a dedicated attorney, but they're not in our department. So, it would almost be, a complete reorg just to make that work.
And I just wanted to go back to, what Jackson pointed out, I think, which would be a concern from a practicality standpoint of, let's say you're a growing community, or many of you maybe have already been exposed to the wonderful city of Renéville, but let's say, Renéville is a sleepy, bedroom community, and then all of a sudden we land some major, employer, or, we get covered and we're mentioned and, in this year's blockbuster movie or whatever, and we explode. So now volume is up, so revenue is up. Right. And so now we have to operate according to direct costs. So I would argue we now would have to lower our fees. Well, what if that boom, turns out the director of that movie is a racist, so now everybody hates Renéville, or that company folds and goes under. Well, now activity is dropped, right? But our fees stayed the same. And now, from a bill Ashrae passed a number of years ago, if we want to increase any of our fees, we now have to provide 60-day notice. We now have to publish that we are now increasing taxes, which is very difficult for some of our local governments from a political standpoint to do that, which now means that fee is never going up, which means your capacity is never going up, right? Because you can't raise the fee to then continue to operate to meet the demand of your, permit desk. So, Jackson covered that, but I just wanted to kind of cover the real world of how it interplays with another law that also affects us.
Well, and your elected officials are elected to make the decisions, not somebody at the state.
I have a quick question, Mr. Chair.
Spoken like a true league employee. I don't know who that was.
So I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Rory. So as I read the bill, I think I understand the intent of it. One of my concerns is the way I'm a very literal reader maybe, but I think that, we collect system development fees as part of our permit fees. That's part of our fees we charge when you pick up your permit. And that doesn't come to my department. So how does that play into this?
Yeah, Larry, that's a good point, and that's one that I brought up that we brought up the other day, that would be something that we would need to clearly state that except as allowed by the impact fee statute. Because yes, we do recognize that building permit fees often encapsulate your system development fees or impact fees, which are obviously not going to be spent within your departments.
So one of the challenges I see with this, Jackson, as it's going forward is in using the Renéville simulation model here, as the department would constantly be in the middle of a fee study to maintain whether it's going up or down, which is going to incur tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on study costs to just analyze to make sure that we were at a true cost recovery method.
Yep.
Right, yeah, because Renéville is going to have, like all of our cities, large fluctuations, from time to time as developments open and close.
Which also puts us on a lag time, because how long does a fee study actually take?
Goodyear's been going through one for over 2 years now.
Yeah.
Same here. So another part of the bill that I haven't heard mentioned talks about, I think for transparency's sake, posting on our website not just what the fee schedule is, but the way I took it to read was all the permit invoices would have to be available on the website. So if somebody paid for a permit, now that has to be published. And I mean, that's another person doing that work.
Or are you looking for an itemized receipt similar to what you get at the grocery store? How many bags of rice you bought, how many sodas you bought, how many steaks you bought, or whatever. I mean, doing that as part of the permit, I can see that, but to itemize everything, not everybody's going to get all of the services that we offer.
Yeah. So I guess there's kind of three things I would point out in this. Number one is that, I don't know that it would necessarily require you to do a fee study at all times, simply because of the fact that the language is a little bit more ambiguous. It just simply says that it has to be reasonably proportionate to the costs associated. It doesn't have to be exact. And the current statutory requirement is recovering reasonable costs. So there is some definite overlap there that would kind of come into play with how you operate currently. Secondly is, I don't know that you would have to do an enterprise fund. It just simply says that any fees that you collect for a building permit have to be used within the department. I mean, certainly your departments collect way more than building permits. I mean, you have all your zoning fees and so forth. So I would think that as long as the city could identify, which is similar to what the third line requires, just how much revenue it was collected and then how that money was spent within the department, that would seemingly satisfy that requirement. But then thirdly, the point with the third sentence was just simply whenever cities and towns go through and do a fee update, oftentimes we have discussions about what the extent to which you are engaging in cost recovery, what percentage of cost recovery you're doing, to what extent is the general fund subsidizing your departments. And oftentimes we ask questions just simply, well, how much money did you collect in fees? And what were your general expenses? And oftentimes we're not able to get those types of questions answered. And so it becomes very difficult to determine the extent to which we are doing cost recovery, whether those costs are reasonable, and then also the extent to which other city funds are being used to fund development activities, all of which I think would be important information for people to have.
How do you define reasonable?
In terms of what the reasonable cost, I mean, I think just generally speaking, because of the extent to which we work with all of the cities and towns on other issues, for instance, in the impact fee world, we get a pretty good idea of, because those costs are itemized, we do get a pretty good idea of how much certain things cost. And so we're able to then make a determination based on that, what's reasonable. And so we can look at something and we can say, okay, this is way out of whack of what we would normally see for this type of service. And so therefore, in our estimation, it's unreasonable.
I'd give the shorter answer.
Renee?
Up to lawyers. That's what we pay.
Yeah.
That's what all sides pay lawyers for, right?
Jackson is a lawyer.
Jackson is.
Right.
That's why.
I know. Yeah. That's why he. I mean, I say it half jokingly, but that's why he can say he has a. I mean, he's probably been involved in many of those discussions of what different parties.
I guess what worries me is what we may consider reasonable, Jackson may consider unreasonable, or vice versa, and then it becomes a long drawn out negotiation that I'd have to add to our fees.
Well, and keep in mind, sorry to interrupt, Michael, but just keep in mind that that's what the statute says today.
Yeah, I understand. I'm probably making a bigger deal out of what the intent is, but I'm just reading it literally, and I'm thinking the worst about the amount of work and effort that we have to put into this.
Yeah, and I understand that, and that's some of the issues that was raised at the committee hearing yesterday. And so I understand where you all are coming from. And again, this is another instance where I'm appreciative of your feedback. Like I said, with the prior bill, I'll take that back and we'll kind of evaluate how that goes into play with our analysis. But back to Larry's point, I mean, we've already talked about, at least as it relates to impact fees being collected as a part of the building permit. So we'll evaluate these other concerns as well.
Sure.
I have to disclose that I am married to a lawyer. But I would also say, I understand the concerns from some of the folks on here, but I will be honest with you. I could ask the municipal attorneys, and I bet you half of them would say, I love reasonable. Reasonable lets me play. And half of them would say, Renee, I hate reasonable. I want certainty. I don't want a gray area. So I think it's not even like a side thing. It just kind of depends on your your approach, which is not to then don't go to your attorneys to say Renee said, but it is one of those interesting things of all throughout statute and code we see that language, and I mean, to some extent it is there to allow some play. So but this is also helpful. I think it's been very helpful for me as well, and we'll go back to our staff and what's nice is me and Jackson can be cordial. And then Tom and Spencer we can be the good cops. They can let them be the bad cops.
Yeah, I guess one last question would be, if this passes and goes through, then what's a typical time frame that you're looking at in order to be in compliance and to show this? Because the way I read it is we would have to start posting this information on our website and show that we're collecting reasonable, and then again, if we feel it's reasonable, but somebody else doesn't, then, it leaves the sandbox open, Renee.
Renee, I didn't get
Randy, that's a good question. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Well, I was saying, Renee, I didn't get the position of the league on that one when we started this one.
Oh, sorry, the league is opposed.
Okay.
Well, I mean, so generally speaking, it would have the general effective date, right? So 90 days after session ends, typically August, September range. I mean, I think this goes to, and maybe this is something that Jackson could take back. I mean, if this were to pass and be enacted, I would argue maybe it'd be easier to make it to, if possible, make it to July 1st, so it would tie with your budget, right? So then it actually could give you time to time your fee and whatever information you have to establish what that reasonably proportionate fee is. Because again, I mean, and again, I guess that's the question is arguably becoming effective, let's say, August 12th or whatever, or what have you. I think there's also, and I say this having worked, with cities and worked with Jackson, I don't know that at least certainly his group would then seek out, August 13th, we're coming after you. Where's your new fee? Where's your report? Because I think there'd be a recognition that you can't post to your website necessarily information that you haven't been required to collect before. I don't know, Jackson, if you guys maybe have a different perspective on that, but I do think that is a legit concern. That's why I think maybe delaying it to a fiscal year or some sort of date certain in order to allow for data collection and some data analysis.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable comment as it relates to kind of the reasonably proportionate standard of this. I don't know that, we would immediately say that anybody's fees as they're currently standing right now are not reasonably proportionate.
Then why do we need to?
It's very similar to, we, at least as far as long as I've been with the association, whenever any of you have updated your permit fees, we've always sat down and had a discussion, and we've talked about whether or not, we think they're reasonable. And I can even think of a couple of examples where we've supported fee increases because there was going to be capacity that was going to be added and things like that our members felt like that they were willing to pay for. So I think to a large extent, we've engaged in that discussion as we've gone along, at least over the last 10 years. And again, the standard is really close to what the current statute says. Now, as it relates to posting the information on your website, Randy, that's an excellent point, and that would require some time to begin to collect that data and have any sort of data set that's meaningful to begin to post that on your website. So I've made that note.
Jackson, can you tell us the origin, the problem that this legislation is trying to solve? If you're saying that you don't think immediately there's any unreasonable building permit fees out there, that anybody's in violation of this, what's the problem? Are you just?
I think it's two things. Number one is I think it is kind of empowering the building departments to have that money available at their disposal to reinvest in their departments. Particularly when you start to run a surplus because of increased demand, to then add capacity to continue to maintain your turnaround times. That would be number one. And then number two is to kind of provide, I think somebody used the word transparency. That's a good one. But just the idea that we have more data and information available to us to kind of more finely tuned to figure out what are the actual costs associated with issuing the building permit, and then how much money is being collected by the city or town to basically pay for those services.
And our elected officials look at that every year when they approve a budget. Sorry.
Okay, does anybody else have any more comments on this?
My last comment is I hope that I'm always happy to come back to this group, but my one hope is that Reneeville stays with you forever.
Yeah, and I just want to once again thank everybody for their comments and for their thoughtful review. This was a very helpful discussion for me, and I really appreciate your discussion.
I just wish we could have had this discussion a few weeks ago before it all came out of committee.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been helpful.
Jackson and I will talk offline about.
And the other thing I will say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the other thing I will say is, if there are other things that come up, or even in future years when you see bills like this, please give me a call. I'm always happy to talk with any of you about any of the issues or concerns that you have. But specifically as it relates to these two bills, as we continue to go forward, if you think of something else or something comes up during the course of your work, please pass that along. You can either give me a call or send me an email, and I'm happy to discuss it with any of you.
Thanks, Jackson. Okay, Renee, you didn't have any other bills to discuss, did you?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
All right.
Hey, can I add one more just real quick? This is a bill that actually did not make it out of committee, but I wanted to bring it up because it's an issue that has come up from time to time, and that was 1102. Which would have mandated electric vehicle charging stations in single-family homes. Some of you sent that over to me saying that you wanted me to review it or that this might be something that we would be interested in. And this is an issue that we're looking at very closely. And in particular, we're very, very concerned about not just the actual cost of the wiring in the garage, but the requirement for additional backbone infrastructure that would be required throughout the subdivision. And so we opposed that bill, and you know, we have a history of opposing these types of mandates. And so we're doing some additional digging in terms of what the actual costs are associated with this. But just know that that is an issue that we are very worried about and that we are very strongly opposed to, and that we will continue to do a lot of work on.
All right, thanks, Jackson.
Yep.
Moving on to agenda item number 9. We have MAG Building Codes Committee Chair and Vice Chair appointments. So in the committee operating policies and procedures were approved by the MAG Regional Council on July 22nd, 2009. And on January 25th, 2012, the Regional Council approved updating the policies and procedures section 505. Terms of officers are a 2-year term for technical committees and both policy committees. The Building Codes Committee Chair and Vice Chair appointments are due to expire on June 30th, 2021. So according to the MAG Committee Operating Policies and Procedures, the current Vice Chair will ascend to the Chair and the new Vice Chair will need to be appointed. Those members interested in the Vice Chair position will submit letters of interest to the MAG Regional Council Chair by Monday, May 3rd. Write that date down, folks. At their May 17th, 2021 meeting, the MAG Executive Committee will appoint a new Vice Chair for the MAG Building Codes Committee. Please refer to the attachment for, I'm guessing that attachment, because I didn't look, Scott, is the application?
It's just a letter, basically.
Letter format?
Yeah, no, it's a letter outlining all the stuff that you just read, plus a little bit more detail. Basically, if anybody wants to be the new vice chair after Mike's term is up and Dale becomes chair at the beginning of July, you can let me know, and you could, if it's easiest, you could just email me a copy of your letter of interest, and I'll get it to the executive committee. But yeah, address it to the regional council chair, and all that information is in the attachment. But yeah, Dale will be the new chair, and we need to find a vice chair.
All right, any other discussion on that topic? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 10, which is updated MAG Building Codes Committee membership. If there's any new members from jurisdictions, please update that information with Scott so that we can have an updated contact for everyone. Item number 11 is updated service or survey of code adoption. If anybody has recently changed codes, updated them, made amendments, please update that information so that way we have a one-stop source for everybody's codes that are adopted too. Item number 12, topics for future agendas. Anybody have any topics that they would like to have brought before the committee?
I have one, and I don't know if I'm speaking out of place or out of turn, but recently it's come up, talked to our building official, that the city of Glendale currently has under our ordinance to allow waivers for secondary pool barriers. I'm just curious how many villages, municipalities, and cities have eliminated that. I live in Peoria, and I know that Peoria has eliminated that now because a friend of mine's building a new pool. I want to know why I didn't have secondary pool barrier, and I said I built it 11 years ago, and there was a waiver at that time. So just curious about that, number one. Number two, and I'm considering approaching our Director of Development Services. Building officials gave a blessing to see about eliminating that with the city of Glendale. So anyone building a new pool would have to have a secondary pool barrier.
I've worked in a number of jurisdictions in the valley, 3 different ones, and in all of those jurisdictions, there's been a waiver for secondary pool barrier if children under the age of 6 don't reside within the home. And that's just kind of been a standard. There's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's there and it's available for folks if they want to use it.
Well, if you look at our pool ordinance, it says within 30 days upon sale of a property, the new owner must install a secondary pool barrier if required. There's no way to really enforce that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate your comments.
Anybody else have any topics for future agenda items? Not seeing any, but if you do or you think of some, please forward them to Scott and we can get those on the next available agenda. And Jackson, would you just make sure that anything that comes up with what's going down at the legislature would get forwarded to Scott and he can disseminate it out too? All right, guys. With that, we have got through our agenda. We never had anybody from the state show up, did we, Scott?
I don't see him on the list. Ryan Paris, did you join us? If not, then I recommend that we just table that one for the next meeting.
Right, and with that, we'll go ahead and call for adjournment.
It's a future agenda item. A motion to adjourn.
All right, guys, we stand adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Later.
Bye.
Okay, Michael Clack, are you still there?